Okay. So it's a great honor, and I'm deeply humbled by seeing so many of you here after a long night of partying, and I'm also sort of humbled by sort of speaking at the very end of a long line of amazing presentations. I think when I leave this island tomorrow, I'll sort of have at least sort of two things in mind. That one of them being that I've learned a new word, pragmatic. Thanks to Paul. Thank you very much, Paul, for this. And I've also heard the sound of a fish having an orgasm. Thank you, Phil, for that. It's also it's a blessing to hear Bruce speak. Thank you very much, Bruce, and your clarity is amazing. I would want to have like 5 minutes of that clarity. Not that clarity all the time, maybe that must be a burden, but just maybe 5 minutes. And it's also great to finally sort of see Chicks on Speed, whom I've been a fan of for many years, and I've seen them in this sort of stadium concerts before with thousands of people, and now I'm sitting among them. It's a great honor, and I'm gonna ask them. It's gonna be very embarrassing, but some point of the evening I'll ask them for an autograph tonight, I think. But here's Paul. Paul, thank you very much for your contribution. This amazing word that you taught us, which I think we should be very grateful for, because we are also part of a context, a club that produces sort of devastating English words, and it's nice to sort of learn that it can actually produce poetic sort of, notions like you did. And I mean, just to give you an example of what I'm thinking of is that I was recently 42 years old, and when you sort of reach that age in this business, people will come up to you and say that we think it's time that you do like a mid-career show, and that is, I think, one of the most ugly English words that I know. It's like, you feel like this is, about making preparations for your funeral. It's a terrible sort of notion, and I mean, you're like, you're in the middle of your life, and I mean, you're sort of, I was 42 last year, and then yes, but I was 42, and this is sort of the age that the Prophet Muhammad was when he got his messages, the first messages from upstairs. So you think something, big might happen, and not maybe on that sort of caliber, but at least not somebody, wanting you to make preparations for your funeral. So, so thank you, Paul. I'm deeply grateful for this new word that you have given us, and also the biggest honor, of course, is that I'm also basically here as a warm-up to Carmichael. And I know that Carmichael, I drink coffee almost every morning with Carmichael in a place called Sweden, and I know he's been preparing for this speech for months, and it's going to be awesome, I promise you. I also did a response to this sort of thing that was sent out, basically to sort of try and think about what kind of monster the TBA was and is and should be, and I'd like you to sort of disregard this text or email that I wrote. It's full of very imprecise metaphors, and I just try and excuse that for a second, and then sort of get on with things. But it part of it describes the art world as Albanian pyramid scheme. And for those of you familiar with that, it was like this crazy thing that happened in Albania in the 90s, where everybody, or I think 2/3 of the population, bought into this idea of getting rich really fast. It didn't really happen, and mayhem broke loose, and the US had to airlift its diplomats out of the country and things like that. And furthermore, there was another metaphor describing the TBA as a medusoid. And medusoid is this sort of thing that a mad scientist came up with in America last year, which was basically he took the DNA of a rat and rebuilt it as a jellyfish that he called a medusoid. And this is I would like to deeply apologize for these sort of very inaccurate sort of metaphors. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but Carmichael and me, we come from sort of this sort of fundamentalist Lutheran context, Scandinavia, and we're basically taught, in a very subtle way from when we were kids, that metaphors are the work of the devil. So when we sort of finally come up with something, it sort of they appear as sort of tics, uncontrollable, imprecise, and I guess also those of you familiar with the history of the potato would know that the potato came like 500 years ago to Europe and sort of walked its way off through Europe and brought forth basically fed the Enlightenment age. And then it came to Scandinavia and it became schnapps and akvavit. And this summer, I do this thing every summer with my grandfather. You collect these sort of herbs that you add to akvavit. And we usually do two sorts of aquavits, and one being something with, we add the herb. I don't know the English names for these herbs, but it's like kind of a ritual. We go and find them, and then you just basically put it in the bottle, and then you drink it after a couple of weeks. We do pause. I don't know what that is called in English, and then we do malurt. And malurt is like something you also use to scare away insects. It's quite smelly. And the Vikings used it when they were going to war, because it's like, mind-blowing, it's intoxicating, you go mad, basically. And it was the sort of weapons of mass destructions of the Vikings. But I mean, you need a lot of it, and my grandfather and me, we just add a bit of it, and then we like to sort of think that we go mad, but we never really do. But I suspect maybe this year it might have worked, because when I sort of read the text that I sent you guys, I don't understand anything of it. It's like completely stupid, and so I'd like to apologize for that. Okay. Yeah. No offense. But there was another sort of another part of the question that I thought was sort of interesting, and I thought I should have gone in that direction instead. I didn't, but I'll try and do it now. But there was this sort of question about how to be contemporary. And I'd like to sort of dwell a little bit on that, and basically, if we could do a bit of sort of island hopping and go to a different part of the world. And this is a part of the world that I partly grew up in. It's another island. It's called Samoa. It's in the Pacific. And something quite amazing happened last year in this place, and it's quite amazing for me from sort of personal reasons, but also for sort of conceptual reasons that relate to this question about the contemporary. I lived in this place as a kid, and I've sort of been going back once in a while. And every time I come to this island, it's a little bit like, because I don't go there very often, it's so far away, it's so difficult to get there. It's like I see time, and for those of you who've sort of seen time, you know that it's a sort of existential sort of earthquake. It's deeply confusing, and I think Tommy spoke a little bit about it also in regards to Mexico. But then something happened that was extraordinary last year, which was that the Samoan Prime Minister decided to do some time traveling. And what he did was that Samoa just sits 30 kilometers from the international date line, and it's this sort of imaginary line that goes through the Pacific, and that basically, you know, when you travel across this line, the date changes. And Samoa used to be on the sort of Asian side of the date line until 1886, I think it was. And then they sort of thought, the chiefs at that point, that, you know, the important part of the world, the thing that is important going on at the moment, happens in America. So they shifted. They jumped, basically. They realigned themselves in relation to this date line. And then this last year they changed their mind, which was basically, I mean, America is so much the 90s, or it's, you know, it's over. Sorry guys, again, I'm being usual sort of offensive here, but they thought the shit is going on in China, basically, and then they decided to sort of rearrange themselves in relation to the deadline, the date line. And now they're again with the Chinese, basically. So they share the same day as the Chinese. That's symbolic, of course, but it's also, it has sort of direct economic implications, because you can basically trade on a Monday with the Chinese, and, you know, if it's like Sunday, then the banks might be closed and so forth. So anyway, the guy that was sort of the mastermind behind all this was the Samoan Prime Minister, and I'm a sort of deep fan of this guy, and he 3 years ago he decided that Samoa should change its driving direction. Basically they were on the right side, and then he wanted them to be on the left side, so he enforced that. So this is quite a man, you know. He is like basically the architect in the Matrix or something. He's like, so he controls time. I mean, and in a way, you know, this was sort of the wet dream of the Russian avant-garde, that time would be the sort of last human frontier. It's the last dimension that we don't control. And then suddenly, you know, this guy in the Pacific pops up, and he is that. So I thought, I need to go and talk to this guy, you know. I have to see him. And I wanted to actually, my plan here was to show a little bit of this conversation I had with this man, and Daniela told me that it's not going to work because there's too much light, and you know, but so and she told, thank you Daniela, you told that. I was told this morning, so I thought, wow, what can I do then? Because I wanted kind of to bring him into the picture, because I think he's a character, and then I thought, how can I get him here, basically? And then I thought, okay, it's supposedly like a group of creative people, and you know, with large imaginations and so forth. So if we can pretend he's here, and pretend that actually he's sitting here, could that work? So I'll just get up. He's a. Can you move a little bit? He's a little bit of a sort of chubby guy. He's quite fat, and this is something I saw Clint Eastwood did that at the Republican National Congress, and it worked really well. And I know I'm not Clint Eastwood, and you're not a bunch of American Republicans, but I wanted to sort of redo a little bit of this video that I thought I would have played for you. But basically, what I was curious to ask this guy was, so how does it feel somehow to be someone who can sort of, you know, control time? How does it make you? I mean, what? And then, you know, when I was asking him these questions, I'll do that now. Now I'm sort of him responding. Please use your imagination. He would respond in very sort of slightly boring ways. I was a little bit disappointed. He would say, "Yeah, it's very sort of, it's done from pragmatic reasons. You know, we're changing time because of, you know, economy and these things, and had I known sort of Paul's new word, I would have asked, could you please say pragmatic reasons, or but he sort of, and then I would ask him, so but how did it work out in the end? And basically what they did was they jumped a day. They cancelled out the 30th of December last year. The day basically disappeared. They, you know, looped forward, and I would ask him, so how did it go? And again, like with the reference to the Russian constructivist who made this sort of, I don't know if you know of the sort of opera that Malevich did, that was part of, called Victory Over the Sun. It's all about sort of, you know, these machines and people who capture the sun to basically control time, and this guy is known as also a famous archer. He receives silver medals in the South Pacific Games and so forth, and it's said of him that he's such a good archer that he can shoot down the sun. But anyway, he would also tell me that it wasn't that easy, and basically a lot of problems came in relation to this sort of time travel. One of them being that, what do you do with mortgages when a day disappears? You know, do you have to pay mortgage for the day that is not there? Furthermore, he caused a sort of a very serious sort of conflict within some Christian congregations, because there are Christian congregations that celebrate, that have their Sundays on Saturdays. And then when you suddenly, you know, cancel out a week in the day and jump forward, does that mean that you are now in sync with the rest of the Christians? Or, you know, do you still have to keep on basically having your holy day on what would now be a Friday? And they couldn't kind of agree on some of these things. And I think one of these congregations actually split in two based on sort of a theological disagreement of how to do this. Okay, Carl Michael is getting anxious. So if we sort of imagine he's like now flying away again, and I'll sit down, and then I again, like out of a lack of not having the screen here, I wanted to sort of ask you to imagine another sort of image and that I had wanted to show you, and that was an image about something that came up also that has to do with this during this summer, which was, I'm sure you know the image with the bullet that penetrates an apple, which is from, I think, 64 or something. And it was basically an image that was taken with somebody obsessed with basically photographing time, and American scientist, and it was taken at a shutter speed of a millionth of a second. And this summer, another mad scientist from the MIT came up with this camera that could basically had a shutter speed of a trillionth of a second. And when you start photographing things at this speed and recording, basically filming, you actually record the you record the light. I mean, the light traveling. So if you sort of imagine, this is an image that's existing. You can just go online and watch it. Probably some of you already saw it. It's a small clip of a piece of light traveling through a Coca-Cola bottle. But if you imagine sort of a light photon, basically traveling through a Coca-Cola bottle, it's a very difficult thing to imagine. But if you try, and then if you think of light also as a kind, light behaves a little bit like water. You know, it creates ripples and waves, and what happened here that relates to this idea about how to be contemporary is very important, and it leaves great hope for the TBA, because what happened and you can see this from the images, if you close your eyes and imagine the ripples that a light photon creates when it travels through a Coca-Cola bottle, was that at the speed of light, the ripples didn't happen in a chronological sort of way. So basically, I mean, when you photograph this at the speed of light, chronology is basically sort of blown up, which I think is amazing news on the question that, you know, I'm trying to sort of answer here about how to be contemporary, because it blows up the question, and there's great hope here. And basically, you know, the conclusion would be that you don't have to worry. You know, it's you know, the past is also the present, the future is also the past. You know, the question, you know, basically, yeah, doesn't make sense, and we can all sort of, you know, not worry about it anymore. Yeah, I think that was my point. Carl Michael, do you wanna?
Yeah, I planned this like really for a long time. I wrote some notes here, actually, now, and I actually promised to, since I know that, actually I don't know that Rasmus is such a brilliant mind. I promised that I would repeat his speech in Swedish as my kind of contribution to this, because, you know, that's also very contemporary, I think, to do that in Swedish now. Så jag ska göra det nu på svenska. So I believe it's only Tommy and Rasmus and Jana who understands it. But